Design a library for the future. Welcome to ProdSchool, and today we have a product design question in front of us. Product design questions are common in product manager interviews at companies like Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Uber, and Amazon. These questions can feel really unsettling at times. The good news is that if you know how to approach them, they can become fairly easy to answer. So let's step through our recommended approach as well as one example solution for the problem to help you prepare for your upcoming PM interview. So we recommend using a 3-step approach to answer product design questions in product management interviews. This approach is also known as the BUS framework, where B stands for business objective, U stands for user problems, and S stands for solutions. So if you're preparing for a product management interview, we strongly encourage you to learn this particular framework. Step 1 is business objective. Now step 1 has some key sub-steps that you need to do before starting to think about user problems and how to solve them. These include outlining your answer, defining the business objective. Now, outlining your answer, it shows you have got great communication skills. Similarly, you need to clarify the business situation. Knowing the business context and what it's trying to achieve will help you make better design decisions later on. This is particularly important if the question your interviewer is asking you is sort of vague in nature. At the end of step 1, you should have a clear understanding of what your problem statement is. Step 2 is identification of user problems. Now that you know more about the business situation and the objectives, it's time to think about users and their problems in greater detail. Here are the things you need to do in this particular step. You need to select a particular user type, you need to list user problems, and you need to prioritize user problems. Note that you can skip this particular step or skip this particular part of the discussion if your interviewer has already specified a type of user they want to focus on in their initial question, or if you have already defined a user type with them in your discussion in step 1. It is also helpful to remember that for some products, the user and the customer are not the same person. For example, that's the case for games that parents buy for their kids or softwares that organizations buy for their employees in their teams. Step 3 is solutions. Once you have defined the user problems you are trying to solve, it's time to generate some solutions. Here's how you do it. You list specific solutions based on the problems you have identified in previous steps. You prioritize these solutions and you summarize. After you have selected a few solutions, it's always a good idea to talk about trade-offs. Finally, after going through that exercise, it's a great idea to state the initial question again and summarize what product you suggest building and why. This summary is a simple way of telling your interviewer that you are done answering the question, and again, it's an efficient way of showing you have got great communication skills. Now that you know what approach to use to answer product design questions, let's apply it to a full example. So before moving forward, I would urge you all to pause the video and try answering the question following the BUS method we have just described. Play both the role of the interviewer and the candidate and make decisions regarding what business objective and target users to focus on. Leave a comment at the bottom of this video with your answer. This is a great opportunity to gain some practice for your PM interviews. Remember, there are only so many opportunities to prepare for product design questions. Alright, so here we go with one prospective solution to our problem, designing a library for the future. As always, we'll be using our recommended framework, which is the BUS framework for product design questions for getting to a solution. So step 1, as always, is business objective. So what I'll do is I'll start by outlining the approach we are going to take. So basically, I'll go something like this. First, we'll discuss the business objective. Second, we'll analyze users and the problems we could solve for them. And third, we'll look into prospective solutions and go ahead and make a recommendation. Now note that if you jump straight in and answer the question in an unstructured way, it will be very hard for your interviewer to keep up with you. Basically, they'll be thankful if you give them the overview before you actually start diving into the question. So here are the questions that immediately come to mind to clarify the business objective for this particular design question. The first, what's the business objective? Is it to maximize profit? Is it to focus on an underserved niche? And let's say the interviewer informs you that the business objective is to increase knowledge and enjoyment for a city with 5 million people. The next question will be, what's the intention here? Is there something that present libraries aren't providing its patrons? And let's say that the interviewer informs you that no, that's not the case. Rather, we are just wanting to align ourselves to the future world that's expanding, that's going to be extremely techy, and hence there is a requirement to provide better customer experience. The third question will be, do we already have a target user in mind, or is that something we should explore or discuss? And let's say that the interviewer provides us with a choice to explore here. The next question will be, are we reimagining how a physical library should be in a distant future? Or are we thinking of an exclusively virtual library? And let's say that the interviewer mentions here that he personally feels that physical libraries actually serve as community centers. So what he would want us to do is think of sort of a hybrid library here. And the last question that I would prefer asking my interviewer would be, what is the meaning of the term future? Is it 5 years or 50 years? And let's say that the interviewer mentions that it's around 10 years from today. So our goal is to reimagine libraries of future as thriving community centers which are delightful, efficient, and global. I'll model this based on different personas we'll find at these libraries in a typical suburban middle-class neighborhoods in a city. Now I know this is quite narrow, but I think this would give us a good baseline to brainstorm and iterate it to other class profiles. Does it sound good? And let's say that the interview gives us a go-ahead. So now that you know about the business situation and the objectives, it's time to think about different users and their problems in greater detail. So we'll move into step 2, which is to identify user personas. As a PM, I normally think about my user type or personas because that helps me in thinking of their needs. This helps me in thinking of solutions since I can address their specific needs and make it meaningful for them. So can we take a similar approach? And that's where, let's say, the interviewer says absolutely. So this is where I'll go ahead and list out different personas. So the various personas are: 1. Families or nannies with young children for whom the library is primarily meant for playtime or story time. Second is teens or school students for which the library is a place to hang out, a place to collaborate, to do their homework, to get help for their homework. The third is freelancers for whom library is sort of a place of working as well as a place where they can go ahead and meet clients. The fourth category is retirees for whom library is a place for reading, for community activities and classes, for socializing and for volunteering. And the last category is casual readers for whom library is a place to read and work on their personal projects. Then I'll ask my interviewer, is there any other user persona we have in mind? And let's say that the interviewer mentions that no, let's go ahead with our defined categories. Now, once you've got a target user, you should always think about what problems you can solve for them. An easy way to do this is to imagine them using the existing product or service you are trying to replace. For instance, you can approach this particular step like this. So there are so many cool things one can do to create something that meets all of the above different personas, but as I think about it, let's get to the core purpose of a library, which is a place to borrow books from. Now it is something that all of the above personas will need or they'll use, and we'll measure the success of this new library by the engagement we get in terms of the number of books borrowed and read. So what we'll do now is we'll break this down further into use cases so we can go ahead and build a solution. So the various use cases could be: 1. Browsing through aisles to find books, magazines and media. 2nd, searching for a specific book, magazine or media. 3rd is borrowing, and 4th is returning. Now, once you have identified or defined the user problems you're trying to solve, it's time to generate certain solutions. So first, for each of the user problems you have identified, you should generate potential solutions. So again, my approach would be something like, so we literally walk through the footsteps of a typical library patron. He starts his journey by browsing different books, then he goes ahead and search for these different books. Eventually he'll go ahead and borrow a particular book, and finally he goes into returning that particular book. Now post this, I'll go ahead and list down certain solutions. So on the browsing front, virtual reality based browsing from your home, where you can go ahead and literally walk through a virtual library. Augmented reality will help you with summaries and reviews that show up as you walk through a physical library aisle and look at a specific book. Secondly, on the searching front, voice search through our voice assistant in your library. These voice assistant will do the search in the background. They will inform you of the availability of a particular book. If it's not available, it will place a hold on the copies and provide alternatives for that particular book. The third is on the borrowing front, where there is auto checkout capabilities as you walk out of the library with any physical material, similar to Amazon Go stores that we have today. The fourth one is around returning. Since we are talking about 10 years in future, we can assume that all physical books will have sensors in them to understand your reading status. Basically, they will automatically renew if you are not done by the end of your borrowed time, and automatically return when you are done consuming. If there is a mobile library nearby, you'll get a notification to go ahead and drop your book off there. The last one is around recommender system. So systems can search for what others look for related to the topic you were reading and pull up reading material along with the rating of that particular material. Now at this stage, it's helpful to draw a table where what we'll do is we'll go ahead and prioritize our solutions based on 1, how much value they would deliver for the user. 2nd, their ease of implementation. And post that, we'll go ahead and give our recommendation, and eventually we'll summarize. So for solution 1, because of the fact that we are talking 10 years in the future, we are assuming that VR and AR technologies have become a commonplace, and this will be absolutely essential for its value to the user. This is reasonable because we already have significant investments in these areas by all major companies. Hence, for the overall value to user, I'll give this solution a rating of 3, and for the ease of implementation, I'll give it a rating of 2. Solution number 2 and 3. Now, considering NLP has already achieved human parity and speech-based systems are already in place, along with the fact that we already have Amazon Go-like stores, in 10 years, this can easily be a reality. Again, I'll give the value added to the user a rating 3, and similarly the ease of implementation for this particular solution, because we already have the technology in place, I'll give that rating also as 3. Solution number 4. Now, installing a sensor in every book brings in a lot of value to the consumer. However, just because we don't have any technology which meets this particular requirement today, I'll rate it slightly lower on the implementation aspect. So the ratings that I'll give will be 3 and 1. And for solution number 5, because of the fact that recommender systems are already a commonplace today, hence this one is pretty straightforward. So I'll give it on the value added a rating of 2 and a rating of 3 on the ease of implementation. I gave it a rating 2 for value added because at times people already know what they want to search for, the next book that they want to borrow, and hence it might not add value to every single user out there. Now, once you have generated a few ideas, it's time to prioritize the ones you will recommend building. A common way of doing this is to pick up solutions which add the maximum value for the user and which are easiest to implement. Now, know that the ratings that you gave previously will obviously be debatable, as they will be based on judgment, but your interviewer is mainly interested in how you think, not the ratings themselves. So as long as you are able to justify your grading with sound logic, they will think that you are doing a good job. So after doing all of this, I'm things, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and give a particular recommendation. So based on this, our recommendation will be solution number 2, 3 and 5 for the initial MVP, and eventually we can inculcate the AR VR technology, that is solution 1. Now after you have selected a few solutions, it's always a good idea to talk about trade-offs and metrics that you will measure for understanding your solution's success. So for solution 2, the obvious trade-off will be to have cross-language capabilities to support local languages for communities. That's one. Similarly, for solution number 3, it will require mitigating the safety and security concerns that are out there. Now, in terms of the metrics that I need to measure, so I'll measure the success of this particular library by measuring the following. 1, number of automated checkouts. 2, percentage of checkouts based on voice search matches. 3rd, percentage of checkouts based on recommender engine matches. 4th, late returns frequency. And the last, number of visitors to VR library per day. VR's DAOs basically. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, after going through this overall exercise, it's a great idea to state the initial question again, to summarize what product you suggest building and why. Our recommendation is to build a tech-enabled hybrid library with the goal of increased knowledge and enjoyment for a city of 5 million people. The core purpose of a library is a place to borrow books from, and that's something that all the personas will require. So our vision for this library of future will include the following. 1, voice-enabled searching and browsing based on books availability. If the book is not available, it will place a hold for us on the copies and provide alternatives for that particular book. 2nd, auto checkout capabilities for the patrons. 3rd, a recommender system to suggest the next books that you might like reading based on your prior history. 4th, VR-based walkthrough along with book summaries and reviews. Alright, so that was an answer to a product design question. How would you design a library for the future? Know that this is just one approach and your answer will almost always be different from ours. It's absolutely okay. This is just to get your brain going for your upcoming PM interview. Which brings us to the next piece, which is what are the mistakes to avoid when answering design questions. Now there are 2 common mistakes candidates make while answering product design questions that you can easily avoid. 1, a lot of candidates simply skip step 1 and start answering the question without first agreeing with their interviewer on a clear objective or a target user. As mentioned before as well, this is a big red flag for your interviewer. 2nd, many candidates, they don't spend enough time selecting a single target user or creating a list of user problems. They start working on step 3 too soon. The more work you do in steps 1 and 2, the easier brainstorming and selecting solutions will become. Moreover, as a general tip around how to practice product management interview questions, here is our recommended approach. 1, you need to learn a consistent method for answering product questions. For example, for product design questions, learning the particular bus framework that we just mentioned. 2nd, you need to practice by yourself and your peers. A great way to practice the method for solving product design questions is to interview yourself out loud. This may sound strange, but it's an excellent way to improve the way you communicate your answers during an interview. Play both the role of the candidate and the interviewer, asking questions and answering them, just like 2 people would do in an interview. Alright, thank you for watching everyone. Put a comment down below in case you have queries, and I'll see you in the next one.